The capital of the United States was built on the East Coast, approximately halfway between the northernmost and southernmost points of the 13 founding states. The center of Washington is the government quarter with the Capitol, the White House, and the tidal basin. The Mall is a kilometer-wide strip of parkland running east and west, dividing the city into two, extending from the Capitol to the Potomac River. The center is divided into 4 quadrants named after the 4 cardinal points. The official geographical center of the U.S. Capitol is Capitol Hill. Obviously, the Capitol building stands on this small hill, and it is here that all laws are made. The 250-meter-long domed palace is situated in the middle of a park measuring 60 hectares. The Capitol has served as a model for parliaments or court buildings in several cities, for instance in St. Louis or in the capital of Cuba, Havana. The sites of Washington, which together are called the Monument Group, can be seen in the center of the mall. The group of statues in memory of the heroes of the Civil War and a statue of President Garfield are located here. James A. Garfield was the 20th President of the USA and the second after Lincoln to be a victim of assassination. The idea of building the Capitol originates from George Washington, and its plan originates from William Thornton. When Congress decided on building a totally new Capitol, President Washington assigned the French engineer Pierre Lafont to prepare the plans. He rode with him to Capitol Hill in the summer of 1791, and they decided then to place the center of the new Capitol there. Finally, William Thornton, a doctor by occupation, and who was considered only an amateur planner, won the advertised design competition. The building took on its first shape in 1800. Later it was extended and reshaped several times. The obelisk, reflecting in the water of the reflecting pool, was set up in honor of George Washington. The huge 165-meter-high pillar is made of Maryland marble. The Jefferson Memorial occupies a site in West Potomac Park, which is one of the anchor points in the south part of the mall. The neoclassic work is connected to the famous architect John Russell Pope's name, and it was officially dedicated in 1943. On the rounded walls, 4 gates open to the 4 cardinal points. The pediment relief situated above the main entrance, illustrating Jefferson and other leaders of the independence movement, is Adolf Weinmann's work. The dome of the Jefferson Memorial is 50 meters in diameter and 30 meters high. President Jefferson's 6-meter bronze statue in the Dome Hall is the work of Rudolph Evans. The dignified cloaked figure stands on a black granite pedestal. On the wall, quotations from Jefferson are engraved in stone. From the Dome Hall, looking to the north, we can see the tidal basin, the Washington Monument, and the White House. The famous Arlington Cemetery can be approached the most easily from the Lincoln Memorial by microbus. The cemetery is actually located on the territory of the state of Virginia, but it is ranked among the Capitol's sites, as 2 presidents, numerous former cabinet members, high-ranking soldiers, and other famous people are resting here. Arlington Hill used to be the property of General Robert E. Lee, the leader of the Confederate Army, and his house, the Custis Lee Mansion, still stands atop the hill. The southern plantation-styled mansion is today a museum. Following the Civil War, as historical justice, the area was confiscated and the deceased heroes of the war were buried here. Later, the victims of the First and Second World Wars were also brought here, only to be joined by those killed in Vietnam and Iraq. The Eternal Flame in the middle of the circle covered with marble stones is in memory of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, who was assassinated in 1963. The grave, covered with simple marble slabs, is a place of pilgrimage for many. The motives of the assassination are to this day unclear, and their murderer never faced a court of law. The massive Warren Report is available, the aim of which was to investigate the crime. Several hundred theories have been offered on the assassination, from District Attorney Jim Garrison to Sylvain Fox, Mark Lane, all the way to Hans Habe. However, the Senate recently extended the top secret status of documents, which suggests to conspiracy theorists that some of the concerned persons are still alive. Many eagerly await the day when these final pieces of information will silence the conspiracy theorists forever. Wide stairs lead up to the quiet, dignified final resting place of the unknown soldier. The memorial was originally built for the unknown victim of the First World War. Then 2 other victims of the Second World War and the Vietnam War were also buried next to him. The amphitheater-like building behind the tombstone is in their remembrance.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? I am Staff Sergeant Dick Mott of the 3rd Infantry Regiment, United States Army. Guard of Honor, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The ceremony that you are about to witness is the changing of the guard.
"4,000 relatives can congregate here at the same time. However, big crowds only really gather twice a year, on Veterans Day and on Memorial Day."
Out! 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 Halt! Out! Halt! 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 Ready! Ace! Right shoulder up! Post! Right! X!
An honor guard stands at the tomb of the unknown soldier every day, day and night. The ceremonial change of guard occurs every half hour in the summer and every hour in the winter. The audience usually consists of a few mourners and tourist groups from abroad. Chosen to represent the contribution of all Marines is the famous scene of the flag raising on Mount Suribachi during the Battle of Iwo Jima in World War II. This fountain is surrounded by marble pillars that symbolize the 50 American states. President William Taft, Secretary of State John Foster Dulles, Senator Robert Kennedy, Generals Sheridan, Pershing, and Marshall, and the Arctic explorer Admiral Richard Byrd also rest in the cemetery. A newer memorial commemorates the victims of the Vietnam War and is called the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall. Names of tens of thousands of dead soldiers are carved on a black granite wall located on the territory to the east of the tidal basin. At the western end of the mall, on the bank of the river, stands the Lincoln Memorial. The white marble building is reminiscent of Greek temples, which is no accident, as Henry Bacon used the Parthenon as inspiration. Stairs lead up to the entrance of the 85 by 82 meter building. The roof is supported by 36 Doric columns. There are 36 pillars because when Lincoln died, the country consisted of 36 states. A later marble plaque mentions 48 states because Alaska and Hawaii were not yet listed. Although the idea of a memorial for Lincoln was entertained shortly after his assassination, the arrangements dragged on for a long time. The construction, partly due to the First World War, lasted even longer. The building was dedicated in 1922. By this time, the statue created by Daniel Chester French, standing 6 meters by 6 meters, had been completed, as well as the huge interior murals by Jules Guérin. Robert Mills designed the obelisk of the Washington Monument, and the Greek colonnade and reflecting pool were also his idea. Money was collected by public contribution, therefore the construction took a long time, until finally the Treasury made a sizable contribution to speed up the process. The marble walls are 4 meters thick at the base, but only a tenth of that size under the peak. At first, a steam engine lift, now an electrical lift, takes visitors up to the lookout, but who would prefer to get some major exercise can even climb the 898 stairs. The Ellipse is a grassy area connected to the mall. Every year, the huge White House Christmas tree is set up in this park, and the Zero Milestone is also here. The White House is perhaps the best-known building in the world. TV crews and onlookers gather daily behind its iron trellised gate. New York City, America's largest, is located along the coastal region of the Atlantic Ocean on the Boston, Philadelphia, Washington axis. Walt Whitman, the most popular American poet, put it this way in his poem entitled Broadway. What hurrying human tides, or day or night, what passions, winnings, losses, ardors, swim thy waters, what whirls of evil, bliss and sorrow stem thee. Could but thy flagstones, curbs, facades tell their inimitable tales, thy windows rich and huge hotels, thy sidewalks wide, thou of the endless sliding, mincing, shuffling feet, thou like the party-colored world itself, like infinite, teeming, mocking life. New York has always inspired artists and architects as much as writers, poets, musicians, and filmmakers. It's enough to think of Truman Capote's books, Neil Simon's theater plays, Scorsese's Taxi Driver, and Woody Allen's films, plus, of course, the song entitled New York, New York. New York's most seasoned old bridge is the Brooklyn Bridge, which stretches from Manhattan, bending over the East River and ending at Sand Street. The bridge was planned by John A. Roebling, who was the founder of the largest steel cable factory in the world and an expert in building suspension bridges. During the construction, Roebling had a fatal accident, so his son Washington made his plans come true. The longest suspension bridge in the world of that time was dedicated in the spring of 1883, in the presence of the President of the United States and the Governor of New York. The Empire State Building used to be the highest building in the world until the ill-fated World Trade Center surpassed it. Though the highest skyscrapers in the world today are in Asia, the 102-story high Empire State Building has no need to hide itself even today, especially if we consider that it was built in 1931 during the period of the Great Depression. In the entrance hall, the pictures of painter Roy Sparkia show the 7 miracles of the ancient times, and as the 8th miracle, the Empire State Building. The express lift delivers visitors to the lookout terrace at a speed of 37 meters per second. The builders of the city found especially solid bedrock at about 60 meters. In Central Park, we can even see the huge reddish-brown rounded rocks which made it possible to use the same skyscraper construction methods developed in Chicago. The expression skyscraper originated in New York, where the tops of the high buildings are often covered by clouds of steam coming from the river. The engineers Shreve, Lamb, and Harmon designed one of the most characteristic buildings of the 20th century. The Empire State Building is built of 60,000 tons of steel, particularly solid chrome steel and granite, based on a detailed construction plan with carefully disciplined work. Thus, it was completed quickly with 4 or 5 stories being added each week. The building is still one of the favorite places of tourists visiting New York City. The observation deck is on the 86th floor. With the express lift, we can reach even the 102nd floor, but that floor is closed to the public and doesn't offer as good a view as the terrace. One of the largest and most famous cities in the world is lying at our feet. To the south, on the tip of Manhattan Island, the downtown area sprawls. The silhouettes of famous skyscrapers are easily recognizable, and the place of the World Trade Center Twin Towers is painfully empty. Farther away, the Statue of Liberty holds its torch high, and among the checkerboard-like, geometrically ordered streets, we recognize Broadway, winding a bit irregularly. To the west, Madison Square Garden calls attention to itself, while on the north, Rockefeller Center extends toward the sky, and behind both of these, the green of Central Park provides the bustling city with a breath of fresh air. Battery Park is the green area of Manhattan's southern tip. In the time of the Dutch settlers, women said goodbye here to their departing husbands. Huge granite blocks stand as memorials of the merchant mariners who died on the water during the Second World War, and an additional 2 memorials can be seen. One of them commemorates Verrazzano, a Florentine sailor and the discoverer of the bay, and the other one is of James Fenimore Cooper, the world-famous writer of Indian and adventure stories. This park was his favorite place. From the promenade, we can watch the harbor traffic. Tankers and trade ships can be seen here, as well as huge luxury ocean liners. Small pleasure ships and the ferries to Staten Island, Governor's Island, and Liberty Island also depart from here. The famous Statue of Liberty, as its name suggests, stands on Liberty Island. We can get there by boat in 20 minutes. Standing 47 meters high, this statue depicts a woman holding the torch of freedom in her right hand and the Declaration of Independence in her left hand. The total height of the green figure standing on a stone base is 93 meters, its weight is 225 tons, and there's a lookout in its head. Very likely this is the most famous statue in the world, and there's probably no one in the world who's not seen at least a picture of it. The French produced the statue from public contributions and presented it to the United States as a symbol of the two nations' friendship. Inspiration for Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi's work was provided by the main figure of Delacroix's painting, Liberty Leading the People. The model was the sculptor's mother. The statue arrived on the deck of the Isir frigate in 350 pieces. Its assembly took 4 months. Niagara Falls is on the northern border of New York State, on the territory of the Great Lakes, northeast of Washington and New York City. Niagara isn't the biggest, but probably the best-known waterfall in the world. Human hands tamed the rumbling natural miracle near the national border separating the USA and Canada. The waterfall that is between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie is one of the most admired sights in North America. In 1885, the surroundings were declared a national park and nature reserve. In his book, John Altman wrote, "The real value of Niagara Falls is that nature has so far been able to overcome tasteless commercialism. Neither the go-getter peddlers nor the sugary pink honeymoon hotels can overcome the fascinating view of the water gushing white." The waterfall can be observed from several vantage points. Photographers spend half a day just trying to find the ideal spot from which to shoot, and then 100 meters away, they find a much nicer one. Regardless of the method chosen, walking tour, boat, or helicopter, you'll have an unforgettable sight. Let's start the tour on Goat Island, which we approach from the lookout by railway. This island divides the river into the 56.5-meter-high American Falls and the Canadian Falls, only 2 meters lower. The latter is connected to a smaller waterfall called Bride's Veil. Here we can choose to descend by lift to the point where the white frothing water rumbles into the river, or we can go up to see the waterworks from a helicopter. Rainbows are projected onto the sky from sunbeams breaking the sparkling surface of the water, breaking the monotony of the shades of blue and white. It's understandable that the bridge connecting America and Canada is called Rainbow Bridge. Those who participate in the walking tour get protective coats, but even these don't guarantee totally you won't get wet. On the cable railway, however, we rise above the waterfall. The raft tours are adventurous and wet, but we can also choose pleasure boats. Their strong-powered engines fight against the huge deluge and take their passengers to the middle of Horseshoe Falls. From here, Niagara can be seen almost from inside. The surroundings are full of vantage points, terraces, and towers. Many say that from the Canadian side, the view is nicer. After the waterfall, the Niagara runs continuously through a mountain gorge, which is 11 kilometers in length and nearly 100 meters deep. The guidebook states, "The tourist is rightly fascinated by the marvelous power of nature. The greenish water of the river falls with elementary power, dissolving into dust-like grains in the depths, forming a real curtain above the lake. The whole island is rumbling, howling, the pictures changing from second to second. In winter, when parts of the waterfall freeze, the spectacle is perhaps even more shocking." During the night, the Horseshoe Falls glitter in colored lights, which is equivalent to the light of 4,000 million candles, and this is no exaggeration. Here people don't bother with saving on electricity, since it is produced by the falls in abundance. The United States receives 2 million kilowatts, and Canada gets 1.8 million kilowatts energy from the Niagara. We can learn more about the power plant in the Niagara Power Project Museum, which is located in Prospect Park. The surroundings of the Great Lakes are known from James Fenimore Cooper's stories about Indians. Since the building of the St. Lawrence Channel, the 5 Great Lakes have been open to ocean-going vessels with a direct connection to the Atlantic Ocean. The Welland Canal bypasses Niagara Falls, and the Erie Canal that connects the lakes with the Hudson River both provide the opportunity for pleasure boating between the Appalachians and the Atlantic coast. Thousand Islands are the holiday paradise of the Great Lakes area, where pleasant holiday resorts like Clayton or Alexandria Bay offer ample opportunity for boating, fishing, and swimming. Chicago is located on Lake Michigan in Illinois and is the 3rd largest city in the United States. America's image is largely determined by its skyscrapers. Chicago's silhouette is one of the most impressive in the world, which is understandable if we know that such artists worked here as Sullivan, Burnham, Fundaroa, and Frank Lloyd Wright. They taught America and the world how to build skyscrapers, and these towering buildings were born earlier in Chicago than in the more famous New York. In 1871, a third of the city with many buildings of wood was demolished in a fire. The local legend says that O'Leary's cow kicked over a paraffin lamp in the barn, and this caused the fire. It's said that 17,000 buildings were destroyed, and only 2 remained unscathed, the water tower and O'Leary's shed. Whether it's true or not, it's sure the people who lost their houses wanted to quickly construct buildings which made maximum use of the more and more expensive sites. Planners saw the solution in reinforced concrete structured buildings, which also gave better protection against fire than houses made of wood. Chicago is full of surprises for pedestrians, not only because of its skyscrapers, but also because the lakeshore is lined with verdant parks and beaches. The most elegant street of the city is Michigan Avenue. The section between Oak Street and the river is called the Magnificent Mile. The most characteristic building on Michigan Avenue is the John Hancock Center. The 100-story black steel tower can thank its unrivaled overall impression to the tubular system and its distinctive X-bracing. To this day, Chicago still has to fight the memory of Al Capone and his gang. In the America of Prohibition, this city was the hotbed of crime, and though these years are over, many still judge Chicago based on its past. Today, Chicago is a real multicultural metropolis with an ethnic image defined by Irish, Polish, Jewish, and Italian immigrants, in addition to Anglo-Saxons. Besides industry, agriculture, and trade, science, culture, and tourism are rapidly gaining ground. Several huge universities, full-season opera houses, world-famous symphony orchestras, theaters, cinemas, and museums make it the cultural center of the Midwest. Though the city's enormous, the most important sites are in the Loop. This is the area encircled by the downtown elevated railway. Here are the tower buildings, considerable from the urban point of view, with long extending beaches at their feet along the shore. A huge Greek-like block, the Field Museum of Natural History, is located between Burnham and Grant Park. It's one of the most significant institutes of its kind in the world. Its materials can be divided into 4 groups: anthropological, botanical, geological, and zoological exhibitions. The John G. Shedd Aquarium is also built in neoclassical style, standing on the peninsula extending into the lake. In its 200 containers are living more than 7,000 aquatic animals. Most skyscrapers also function as lookout towers, but there are other ways of sightseeing as well. We can also admire the city by helicopter, double-decker, or ship. Chicago has been dubbed the Windy City, referring to the fact that there is always a soft breeze blowing from the lake, but also figuratively because fresh winds are blowing, especially concerning architecture and city planning. In the 15th century, more and more people were dissatisfied with the greed and financial activities of the Catholic Church. Therefore, they established their own religious order. The leaders were Lutherans, Calvinists, and Anabaptists. Naturally, the Catholic Church did not approve of the new religious trends and fought with every means at their disposal. The 2 main branches of the Anabaptists are the Mennonites, led by the Dutch Catholic priest Menno, and the Amish sect, led by the German priest Jacob Amen. The Puritanism of the 2 groups is rather close to each other. The main difference was brought by development. The Mennonites allow the usage of machines developed since the Industrial Revolution, while the Amish refuse them. The Mennonites pray in churches, the Amish in their own homes. In a Mennonite house, there's electricity, telephone, and car. The Amish have only candles, horses, and horse-drawn carriages. The Amish live in small, isolated communities, doing agriculture and small industry works. For them, the most important is the community and the family, with 3 to 4 generations living under one roof. If someone builds a house, the others help. The Amish are interesting for tourists visiting America because they live in a particularly closed religious community, consciously separated from our modern world. They dress and work as if they were still living in the 17th century. First of all, their dress is striking. The married men wear black hats and have beards without a mustache. The women wear unembroidered clothes and do not cut their hair. The biggest surprise for the tourists that they use horse-drawn carriages called buggies instead of cars. They don't use electricity or television. Who's seen The Witness or For Richer or Poorer surely remembers some scene showing Amish life. It's typical for their religion that they don't try to convert anyone, but warmly welcome guests from the outside into their circles. Generally, they work on farms and have their own schools for their children. Because of this, some decades ago, they even had conflicts with state regulations, but finally managed to regulate their operation in a way acceptable for everyone. Their community cohesion is exemplary. The Amish have preserved their own language. Even today, they speak the Pennsylvania Dutch language called Platt. Their religious life determines everything for them. On the other hand, they still don't build churches. Their worship services do not contain liturgy, claiming that music upsets human emotions and can therefore be harmful. We find St. Louis on the state borders of Missouri and Illinois, an area which is rightly called prairie country. From Karl May's novel Winnetou, we not only know how to kill a grizzly bear with our bare hands, but also that the West begins in St. Louis. Today, the city still tries to tempt tourists with the Gate to the Wild West image. The Memorial Park built around the Gateway Arch also seeks to communicate this image. Eero Saarinen, American architect of Finnish origin, can be proud of such works as the Technical Center of General Motors, the Milwaukee War Memorial Center, the Cambridge Auditorium, the TWA Flight Center at JFK International Airport, or the main terminal of Dulles Airport in Washington. After his death in 1961, the American Architects Association awarded him the posthumous Gold Medal. He was also well known as a furniture planner. Huge amounts are paid for his works at auctions. His best-known work is this 192-meter-high, slim, silver-colored gateway arch. It was built between 1962 and 1965 from nearly 900 tons of stainless steel plates. Elevator cars holding 5 people run on an oblique path to bring visitors to the top, where they can enjoy the panorama of the river and the city. The exhibition, placed under the huge modern arch, also commemorates the workers who constructed it, and we can get a close view of Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis airplane that was the first to fly over the Atlantic Ocean. The Westward Expansion Museum is in memory of the pioneers who conquered the unknown West. In 1859, from the territory of the original 13 states, hundreds of thousands of settlers and immigrants started to move west where they hoped to find a new and more prosperous life. The settlers had to work hard to procure even the basics needed for living. In the Pioneers Museum, covered wagons and countless artifacts illustrate the heroic age of those who helped to shape the history of the Wild West. President Jefferson bought the lands extending to the west of the Mississippi, the so-called Louisiana Purchase, from the French, thus giving the opportunity for expansion to the American pioneers. For this reason, the former town center, which is a park today, is named after him. On the territory of Jefferson Park once stood a slave market. Now there's the old courthouse, which reminds one of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., although the iron-structured dome of the courthouse is higher than the one in Washington. Here, the trial of Dred Scott was held, who, in spite of being an African American, demanded civil rights for himself. Though he lost the case, this matter finally led to the Civil War. Oklahoma City is the capital of Oklahoma, located to the southwest of Missouri. The saddest side of Oklahoma City is the huge metal gate in remembrance of the victims of the terrorist attack of April 19, 1995, and the symbolic empty abstract metal chairs, 168 of them. That's how many died in the explosion, and 19 of those were children. The flowers on the memorial never fade. The relatives and the city inhabitants will never forget that horror. At 9:01 in the morning, due to an explosion, the Murrah building, housing a health center, was almost entirely annihilated. The deranged religious fanatic Timothy McPhee had filled a small truck with homemade explosives, detonated it, and walked away. He was caught only years later, identified by the chassis number of the truck. Later, after making a full confession, he was sentenced to death and executed. Oklahoma City has been the state capital since 1910. The industrial city was originally settled on an expansive oil field. More than 2,000 oil wells are in operation in the surrounding area, but the oil city of the prairie is transforming into more and more of a tourist target. On April 22, 1889, the central part of Oklahoma was also opened for white settlers. Tens of thousands gathered at the border with covered wagons. At noon, the great land rush began. During the first years, the pioneers forced the Indians back to smaller and smaller areas, and they then started cattle breeding. Oklahoma's first oil well, put into operation in April 1897, is proudly on display even today. In 1904, the engineers found petroleum and natural gas in huge quantities, and from this time, cows had to share their pastures with nodding oil wells. Stanley Kramer's film entitled Oklahoma Crude, starring George C. Scott, is about these good old times. The area also inspired the world-famous musical composers Rodgers and Hammerstein. Their piece Oklahoma was one of the hits of Broadway for a long period. Lynn Riggs, their lyricist, was born in nearby Claremore. His house is a museum today. Nearby, the Davis Gun Museum exhibits one of the largest weapon collections in the world. Even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there, said Will Rogers, the actor, humorist, and philosopher known for his numerous quotes and humor similar to that of Mark Twain, and whose birthplace 20 kilometers to the west of Claremore is a real place of pilgrimage even today. The famous Route 66 used to be one of the major federal highways. It connected Chicago to Los Angeles and crosses most of the United States. The 2,448-mile-long way, also called America's Highway, traversed the country from 1926 to 1985. Nowadays, it brings back scenes of Steinbeck, Kerouac, and the Easy Riders' America as a living monument. We continue our way on to the American West, following historic Route 66 to New Mexico State. The capital of New Mexico, famous for Kit Carson and the Apache chief Geronimo, is Santa Fe, a city with a unique atmosphere. On the Santa Fe Trail, tens of thousands of settlers were on their way to the southwest. Santa Fe Trail was the famous film of Michael Curtis in which Ronald Reagan played General Custer, sharing the screen with Errol Flynn and Olivia de Havilland. The city is the oldest capital city in the U.S. The Spanish colonial government moved here in 1610, but archaeologists say the Indians had established a settlement here 300 years earlier. The historical city core still reflects the peaceful atmosphere of the Spanish and Indian era. However, in line with the expansion of tourism, there's no lack of hotels and souvenir shops. Local potters decorate their pots and pitchers made on a foot-operated lathe with traditional motifs. The objects obtainable here are very similar to the ones seen in the Museum of Indian Art and Culture. In its exhibition, the culture and art of the Southwest Indians are shown from the times before Christ. Santa Fe is the city of holy faith, as its name says. The cathedral named after St. Francis of Assisi is the first church in this state to be elevated by the Pope to the rank of basilica. The city was the center of the conquest of Indian territory and at the same time that of the natives' conversion to Christianity. Many consider the San Miguel Church the oldest church of the United States. It was built in 1621. In a guidebook we read, Santa Fe is an especially lively city. Many times the festivities and parades overlap among the Spanish houses with their red-tiled roofs or the yellowish adobe houses of the antique downtown. The most spectacular is, of course, the holiday of the city, the Santa Fe Fiesta, held in early autumn on the weekend before Labor Day and including parades, colorful carnivals, Indian dance shows, and fairs. The main square of the old town is the plaza. It has preserved its old image and its narrow streets are edged by adobe buildings. Typical of the city are the round adobe walls using natural materials and colors of the surrounding land and the usage of the Pueblo Indians' inheritance. The flat roofs of the yellowish-pink cube-shaped houses are held by stump beams, which are here called vigas. In the city, we can still find the charm of incomparable architecture with its link to nature. Under the shaded arcades of the Santa Fe Village, craftsmen's objects are on display. Indian tapestries are spread over the corridor stones to serve as a backdrop for the various wares. Pottery, musical instruments, and mainly decorative objects and jewelry are the focus of this market, but we can also buy genuine Indian feather decorations. Jewelry is partially made of turquoise, which is mined in large quantities in the nearby mountains. The motifs derive from Indian folk art, and some pieces are even made of arrowheads threaded on a leather string. Who would like to buy more traditional but more expensive bracelets or earrings can choose from silver goods. Santa Fe not only has numerous museums and exhibition halls, but there's an extraordinarily large number of art galleries as well. The colors and lights of the land inspire painters and photographers alike. The center of the surrounding Indian pueblos is Española. Indians of Cachina, Pojoac, Santa Clara, and San Ildefonso lived somewhere in the neighboring cave city. They built parts of their houses in the caves, hollowed in cliffs. They made multi-story caves, and there were buildings even on the tops of the mesas. They hollowed out separate caves as storage places for food. Their communal house, which has recently been excavated, consisted of 1,000 rooms. They left their caves in the 15th century to move into dwellings, which became the pueblos of today. Karl May writes in his novel Winnetou, "There are ancestral traditions for this unique building method. The Pueblo Indians usually choose a high bank of a river or the cliffs of a dried-up canyon. They cleverly make use of the circumstances, putting up several story-high, strong stone walls in the slits of the rock faces. Each story is a bit further in than the one below it, and there's a terrace extending in front of it, which is actually the ceiling of the story below. So the ground floor is the most spacious, and the floors above it are progressively smaller and smaller. The whole thing is like a pyramid consisting of cells or a house of cards. There are no stairs in the building. Approaching each floor is possible only from outside, climbing a ladder. If an enemy is coming, the ladders are pulled in, and only those who can climb up who have brought a ladder with them." Heading in a northeasterly direction, we soon reach Canyonland, where a whole series of national parks and nature reserves is to be found, each providing a unique experience. Monument Valley spans the northeastern border of Arizona and the southeastern border of Utah, and thus is the point of intersection of the state lines of Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico, as if drawn with a ruler, in the axis of Grand Canyon and Mesa Verde National Park. The Navajo name of the valley means Valley of the Rocks. The list of natural beauties is long, such as Mount Zion, Bryce Canyon, and Glen Canyon. There's very little rainfall in this area, not more than 10 or 20 centimeters a year. But in spite of it, the erosive power of water has shaped the most typical forms. This is because all the important branches of rivers originating in Colorado and crossing Utah meet here. The area is famous for its steep sandstone mountains rising lonely from the plateau, and its colorful and dramatic panorama created by distinct red plateaus and summits. Its climate is quite special, meaning that not the whole territory belongs to the dry desert climate. The area covered by pine and juniper trees is exactly as large as the one covered by desert shrubs. The sky-high cliffs of Monument Valley are huge square shapes left unharmed by erosion. The pink sandstone summits exude a beauty which evokes respect and humility in people. It's no coincidence that this piece of land, measuring 65 by 80 kilometers, right in the middle of a Navajo reserve, has become immortal through the countless photos trying to catch the quite unique light and color effects at dawn and at sunset. The color of the cliffs is ochre at noon, vividly copper-colored in the light of dawn and nightfall, and a mysterious bluish-black at night. The glaring landscape is familiar not only from photos, but from numerous TV programs and commercials as well. It's also been recorded in films, especially in westerns. John Ford alone shot 7 Western films here, and it was here that Gregory Peck met the old Indian chief in the Western entitled McKenna's Gold. Many times, weak stories were balanced by the fascinating sights. Petrified Forest National Park and Monument Valley remind us of a rainbow petrified in wood. The land is a geological, meteorological, and logical enigma, but above all, it's a fascinating spectacle. We need a vivid imagination to imagine that once, several million years ago, the entire Monument Valley was one high continuous plateau, as high as the peaks are today. The whole environment smoothly conforms to such a wild, austere land of elementary power, emphasizing the cliff shapes formed by nature throughout millions of years. Presently, only a few Navajo shepherds live here, but once entire Anasa's tribes managed to solve the problems caused by the lack of water. They cultivated smaller areas next to the channels they constructed, producing mainly corn and beans. They diverted the rainfall with small dams, only allowing the necessary amount of water to reach the plantations. The mysterious Anasas formed their homes in mountain gorges and ravines, almost invisibly. We hardly know anything about their civilization, but during the past few years, it seems to have become fashionable to research their history. The cave drawings of Monument Valley and its surroundings also tell about this tribe, which the Indians simply referred to as the Old Ones. The Navajo, who replaced the Old Ones, have been living here for centuries and seem to tolerate the raw climate and difficult terrain, jealously preserving their way of life, language, and traditions. The small Indian settlement called Gouting was established in 1923. Today, this is the tourist center of the area. We can rent horses here to explore the countryside with the help of an Indian guide, galloping through a landscape where groups of real and movie cowboys were once riding. We continue our way in a northwesterly direction to the desert state of Nevada, which is famous for the modern version of gold fever, namely legalized gambling. Las Vegas by night is also bathed in light, giving those who arrive in the middle of the night the impression that it's dawn. Electricity for the millions of lights is produced by the huge Hoover Dam nearby. It's on the border of Nevada and Arizona, which at the same time also means a change in time zones. The Colorado River, winding in the depth of the nearby Boulder Canyon, was diverted in 1929, and within 6 years, the most enormous dam of our times was built, 240 meters high and 200 meters thick at its base. This was Hoover Dam, behind it, Meade Lake. This water is the key to the fertility of California, otherwise a half-desert. It is drunk in Los Angeles, San Diego, and several hundred other smaller settlements. The legendary productive Californian plantations are watered with it, and the electricity produced by it supplies Las Vegas and its neon parade. Las Vegas, the capital of casinos, needs no introduction. On its main street, the Strip, are the famous hotels, the MGM Grand, the Excalibur, the Mandalay Bay, the Luxor, the New York, the Mirage, the Venetian, Caesar's Palace, the Circus, Sahara, and the Treasure Island Hotel, and these, of course, are casinos as well. The foundation of the city is a real 20th century success story. In 1931, the state of Nevada, alone in the Union, legalized gambling, and by so doing, created the base for its own existence. At first, only a few casinos attracted a handful of curious people to the desert oasis, which had earlier been populated by Mormons and farmers. The explosive development started after the Second World War and increased in the 60s and even more so in the 90s. The mammoth hotels, casinos, and entertainment complexes of the main street, the Strip, are continually in competition with each other. Technical development has enhanced the glittering city with never-seen-before spectacular elements. Nowadays, approximately 1 million people live here, almost all in the suburbs. Most people here work in the catering or service industry. To serve the increasing number of tourists, ever more waiters, porters, chambermaids, cleaners, shop assistants, and drivers are needed, and in the casinos, croupiers and security guards, not to mention the policemen, firemen, ambulance, doctors, officials, and, naturally, the performing artists, acrobats, dancers, singers, stuntmen, and, of course, the stars. Tourists spend an average of 4 days here, but many, mainly the Americans, visit Las Vegas several times a year. The most serious gamblers try to cook up different systems and often test these on the spot. The other group of visitors act like tourists and, at worst, lose some change to the one-armed bandits. American children, Even if they've already been to Disneyland, the Universal Studios, and the other amusement parks of California and Florida, still want to visit Las Vegas, a citywide amusement park. They, of course, cannot play in casinos or even with slot machines, but there's no need to worry that they'll be bored. Roller coasters, Ferris wheels, and the Stratosphere Tower await them, as well as a live stuntman show at Treasure Island with pirates and a sea battle. They can have supper at Excalibur while watching a tournament of knights, and in Luxor, you can sail on papyrus boats under the shadows of the pyramids. Michael Connelly put it so well in his Las Vegas crime story, Void Moon. The sharp outlines of the casino hotels appeared at around 3 o'clock on the horizon, and Cassie felt the unmistakable mixture of excitement and trembling. Now the return only stirred up painful memories, pity, and ghosts in her. At the same time, she could not stand admiring the brilliance of the place. If there ever was such a place which was born from nothing, that was Las Vegas. As she was driving through it, she recognized that fantastic changes had taken place while she had been away. On every corner, a new hotel had sprung out of the ground, a new temple of greed and excess. Cassie passed a fake New York skyscraper, the colossal MGM Grand, and the new Bellagio. She saw copies of the Eiffel Tower and St. Mark's Square in Venice. Cassie had never lived in those places, but now here she saw them. She remembered what Max had once said. One time everyone and everything comes to Las Vegas, and then there will be no sense to visit anywhere else. Later, they visited different islands and recognized there was at least one place which could not be copied or ruined. Cassie reached Luxor, but her attention immediately turned to the towers on the two sides, the Tigris and Euphrates. Her eyes scanned the top window row of the Euphrates Tower and for a minute stopped at one of the windows. Then she looked down to the pyramid-shaped glass atrium that covered the casino 20 floors below. The sunshine was reflecting so sharply from the pyramid side covered with mirrors like a diamond shining in the light. The complex was located almost 100 meters from there. The way towards the entrance led between mirror-surfaced pools located higher and higher, their fountains performing a continuous, marvelous water dance. She saw the white statues of children playing in the pools. Cleopatra watched majestically from her throne at the edge of the highest pool. Behind Cleopatra, Egyptian motifs mixed with modern elements formed the sand-colored exterior of the casino hotel. The image of Las Vegas was always changing. It renewed itself again and again. Cassie wouldn't have thought that a city basically made of stage scenery could awaken such nostalgia in her. She went over to the opposite side of the Las Vegas Boulevard, from where a moving sidewalk took her, along with other casino guests, to the entrance through the pools in front of the hotel. She noticed that on the way out, the dupes who'd lost their money didn't receive such kind consideration. She found the casino strange. The scenery was the same, the characters were also the same, interchangeable gamblers chasing their dreams. The cacophony of money, together with mechanical and human sounds radiating either joy or despair, was almost ear-splitting. Cassie composed herself and went on, through the forest of slot machines that occupied an area as big as a football field, and through the expanse of gambling tables covered with blue cloth. She knew that from now on, each of her movements would be recorded up there. When in the 1700s, white man first visited the spot where present-day Las Vegas is situated, the way leading there was called Jornada de Muerta, the Journey of Death. At that time, it was unthinkable that anyone could settle in this area. Hoover Dam made it possible. The city, which is also called the Entertainment City of the World or the Capital of Casinos, was established on May 15, 1905, originally as accommodation for workers building the railway. After work was finished, in spite of general practice, it didn't shut down, but on March 16, 1911, officially formed a settlement. In the beginning, mainly people working in the nearby mines and mining engineers, mine owners, and traders specialized in this industry lived here. Gambling was legal in Nevada until 1909, when it was banned. When in 1931 the state, Due to its disastrous economic situation, legalized gambling, and alcohol consumption on the streets again, the first casinos opened in Las Vegas. Due to its perfect location and with its function of a crossroads, it soon became a favorite stop of tourists visiting Hoover Dam, who also gave the local casinos a whirl during their stay. This income financed the famous casino hotels, which have served as a backdrop for numerous films and TV shows. There are also grandiose concert halls and sports arenas, and Stratosphere Tower rises above the city. Las Vegas is like Madonna. Love it or hate it, but one thing you can't do: stay indifferent. Visitors either fall in love with it or take a disliking to it forever. Of course, it also depends on the reasons for the trip, as well as the results of the visit to Sin City. Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley once performed here, as well as Dean Martin, Paul Anka, Bob Hope, and many others. Not long ago, Celine Dion was the main attraction. Today, it's Beyoncé and Cirque du Soleil, a dance theater and circus in one, and the Siegfried and Roy show with their white tigers is invariably popular. Broadway shows also make guest appearances here. For example, in 2008, The Phantom of the Opera was featured at the Venetian. If the dream runners of Europe and America go to California, where do the ones from California go? Asks Jack Altman, and immediately supplies the answer. Well, they usually start from Los Angeles, through the interstate highway going east across the Mojave Desert, through the lava fields, basins of countless dried-up lakes, cross the Nevada state line, and go further until the happy, evil neon lights of the city, rising from the desert, appear in the twilight. This is the air-conditioned Sodom and Gomorrah, Las Vegas. Vegas is one of the world's mythicized settlements, which everyone should see at least once before he dies. A lot of films are produced about Las Vegas, but they can't compare to arriving unprotected into this impudent and lecherous gambling paradise, and finally escaping from the shock which this hot and frozen reality causes. From the many films made here recently, perhaps Ocean's 11 and its sequels are the most popular because of their all-star cast. Stories like this allow us to peek behind the scenes where tourists never tread. If someone doesn't want to gamble, even just observing can be a real experience. Gamblers are quite obviously excited, yelling ecstatically or collapsing with tears of frustration or joy, depending on the current state of the game, showing the full range of human emotions. Poker is generally played in a separate room, away from those playing dice and roulette, baccarat, blackjack, and bingo. Tourists usually warm up on the gambling machines. Slot machines, otherwise known as one-armed bandits, are everywhere, not only in the gambling rooms, but also in hotel lobbies, at bus stops, and even in less obvious places, like built into bar counters or in public toilets. In restrooms, you will also find screens showing the current bingo numbers so that no one will miss the chance of winning just because nature calls. In addition to gambling, the other attraction in Las Vegas is the quickie wedding. Even between two poker parties, you can dash into one of the small chapels and registry offices for a quick wedding. Neither previous announcement nor formal dress is required, and if necessary, even witnesses can be provided on the spot, as well as a photographer, wedding dinner, and honeymoon, which can be enjoyed in one of the nearby hotels. It's good to know that even though it seems like a joke, even this type of marriage is valid, and if someone forgets that he has already had a more serious wedding at home, he or she can be punished for bigamy. If necessary, a divorce can also be arranged on the spot, and it's done in a jiffy. Moving on, to the west we reach California on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, the home of nodding palm trees, sandy beaches, bikini girls, and sunshine, the paradise of film producers. This is Hollywood, land of dreams. Always time to dream, so keep on dreamin'. Sounds familiar, right? It originates from a popular film of the Dream Factory, Pretty Woman. And what experience is behind those words? There have been shoe shiners and immigrant newspaper peddlers who've become millionaire producers. Dishwashers, waitresses, and shop assistants became film stars. Here, everyone is doing something else, just temporarily, until they're discovered and become stars. Rodeo Drive, the shopping destination of the rich and beautiful, was quite near. Vivian just had to cross Wilshire Boulevard and Dayton Way to find it. She'd never been here before. She was admiring the super elegant shop windows of the stores and the elegant people walking on the sidewalks. Vivian's cheap apparel attracted as much attention here as the local ladies' expensive dresses and jewels would have caused in the Blue Banana. Louis Vuitton, this hung above the entrance of a leather shop. Chanel advertised another sign. Diamonds on Rodeo, she read some steps away. Then, Gucci. These names meant something to Vivian. She knew them from postcards, and the thought that now she could enter any of these famous shops to buy clothes for herself stupefied her, literally. Nodding her head, Vivian smiled to herself and stopped in front of a shop window. Then she entered confidently. The shopping streets of Beverly Hills are some of those rare places in Los Angeles where walking is still a custom. The stars haven't lived in Hollywood for ages. Instead, they buy luxury villas for themselves in Bel Air, Brentwood, and mainly in the palm tree-lined streets of Beverly Hills, where high fences and thick hedges protect against the paparazzi and curious fans. Otherwise, it's no secret which house belongs to whom, since walking or microbus tours are also arranged here, and tourist offices even sell small booklets with a map for stargazers. The Oscar Awards ceremony was held earlier in the Ambassador Hotel in the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, then for a long time in Shrine Auditorium. The Kodak Theater was completed in 2001, and its main function was to host this famous event. The Chinese cinema called Grauman's, after its former owner, is the best-known film theater in the world. The building imitates a Chinese pagoda, while the other cinemas of the area are mainly palaces in Art Nouveau, citing the golden age of cinema, the 20s and 30s. On the sidewalk there, we can see the hand and footprints of the stars, the paws of Rin Tin Tin and Lassie, and the footprints of Tom Mix's horse. It also shows how old this custom is, but it's still practiced, and the best-known actors and pop stars feel honored if their reputation is carved in stone. The comedian Bob Hope made this statement about TV in the 50s. Television, that's where movies go when they die. For a long time, the stars of soap operas and TV series didn't have the chance to have their own star or handprint in Hollywood, but today this has all changed. This isn't exactly the heart of the film capital anymore. The studios are farther away on the way to the San Fernando Valley. The most famous is Universal Studio, where we can tour with small microbuses among the sets of old movies and almost have the feeling of an amusement park. In the NBC studio, the audience is let in on the secrets of making a television program. To the south from Hollywood Boulevard runs the famous Sunset Boulevard, and above it, on the Hollywood Hills, gigantic letters advertise the never-fading reputation of the Dream Factory. The Santa Monica Pier, the harbor with the Ferris wheel, is one of the best-known points in Los Angeles. Many TV series and films took place here. The heroes of Baywatch saved lives on this coast. Here, the bicycle cops of Pacific Blue cycled. This small town of 100,000 inhabitants is the beach for Los Angeles to the east of the famous Malibu Beach. On the coast, turning to the south, we find a string of suburbs, which are also holiday resorts. Only the Los Angeles International Airport interrupts the chain of Venice Beach, El Segundo Beach, Hermosa Beach, Redondo Beach, and Palos Verdes. Dozens of airplanes circling in the air day and night are waiting to land at one of the busiest airports in the United States. On the Santa Monica mountain range, Palisades Park towers above the city, from where the coast can be seen all the way from Malibu to Venice. Down below, toy-sized colored cars speed along on the highways. A light breeze ruffles the palm trees of Ocean Drive. On the golden sand of the beaches, young people are playing volleyball, surfers are gliding on the foamy waves. Street musicians, showmen, portrait painters, fire eaters, and breakdancers are swarming on the promenades. Filmmakers, stars, wannabe stars, and tourists peacefully relax next to each other under the parasols. The sun, setting above the Pacific Ocean, turns the continuously rotating merry-go-round and Ferris wheel into a black silhouette.